Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Sat Sri Akal to everyone. जुगो जुगो तो चली आ रही है रीत आओ रल मिल गाइए गीत फेमस सिख दे ए सोने प्लेटफॉर्म ते मैं हाँ तुहाडी अपनी मनप्रीत. Strong women are not simply born, they are forged through the challenges of life. With each challenge, they grow mentally and emotionally. They move forward with their head high and a strength that can't be denied. Yes, they are warriors. No, I think I should say we are warriors. In today's episode, we have an exceptionally talented and creative mind with us who has achieved so much yet always stayed grounded. I am talking about Sardani Harminder Kaur. She's a senior journalist with over 3 decades of experience. She's a filmmaker and did filmmaking from the Toronto Film School. For this achievement, her name was also mentioned on the president's list. I think I have spoken a lot. Let's hear her journey. Let's hear her inspirational journey from herself. Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining.
Sat
Sat
Sri
Shri Akal.
Akal.
Thank you
Waheguru
so
Ji
much
Ka
for joining.
Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki
Thank you, Jiki Fateh.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It's my pleasure. And so looking forward to this interaction. So, with no further delay, I want to know that you have so many feathers on your hat. So, I want to know that how do you manage? Because journalism is very different field and demanding, and then filmmaking is also very demanding, and then creative writing, story writing. You have written so many beautiful stories on Sikhism and other genres also. So I want to know how do you manage all these things together, and what was from where this journey began?
Well, my journey began from journalism. I did my MA English, and by the time I finished, ਮੈਨੂੰ ਪੱਕਾ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਜਾਂ ਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਐਡਵਰਟਾਈਜ਼ਿੰਗ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਾਵਾਂਗੀ ਤੇ ਜਾਂ ਜਰਨਲਿਜ਼ਮ ਵਿੱਚ. Fortunately, ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਆ, there are certain geests who enter your life. So, just as I was finishing, ਸਾਡੇ tenants were a journalist couple, Rangachari, who were working both husband and wife with the statesmen. ਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਮੇਰੇ frequent interactions ਹੁੰਦੇ ਸੀ. ਉਹ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਦੱਸਦੇ ਸੀ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਐਕਸੈਸ ਹੈਗਾ ਪਾਰਲੀਮੈਂਟ ਹਾਊਸ, parliamentary debates, ਉਹ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀ ਮੰਤਰੀ ਨੂੰ ਮਿਲ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੈ. Who doesn't want to be in that high-powered society? So I was sure, I mean, this is the line I want to pursue. But a whole lot of opportunities kept coming my way, and a lot of barriers too. My first problem was I decided to get into journalism, but while I was finishing my post graduation, I had a very, very severe attack of spondylitis, cervical spondylitis, which wouldn't allow me to write even a sentence. Now, how do you become a journalist without even being able to write a sentence? So, for a whole year, that was the time jado hospitals were still government hospitals, या nursing homes, ਇੰਨੇ ਕੋਈ private hospitals ਨਹੀਂ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਸੀ ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਅੱਜ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਹੈ. ਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਇੱਕ ਸਾਲ ਪੂਰਾ ਫਿਜ਼ੀਓਥੈਰੇਪੀ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਸਫਦਰਜੰਗ ਹਸਪੀਟਲ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਸੀ. And one day then my doctor called me. He said, what have you studied? I said English. I did my master's in English. He says, do you want to spend the rest of your life in the hospital? I said, no way. I want to be a journalist. He says, then my advice to you is half the problem is psychosomatic. Forget that you have journalism. Remember that it will never go away. You have to live with this problem and move on. That was the day I decided I'm never going back to the hospital. I went and picked up a job and I started writing. That's how my journalistic journey began.
Wow. So you managed your pain throughout, and so when was the time when you were like, ठीक है हो रहा है, but it's ignorable for me.
I think ਜਦੋਂ ਵੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਕੰਮ ਵਿੱਚ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ engross ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਹੋ,
Hmm.
automatically your mind is diverted towards something else. I still have cervical. In fact, I have a very aggravated back pain also. But I just work and I forget, and actually, it just disappears. The moment you start working, it just disappears. I lived with it and I continue to live with it. Just exercise, and that keeps me going.
Wow. So, ma'am, journalism back then, I'm sure that I'm not very sure, but talking about the situation at that time, ਕੁੜੀਆਂ ਲਈ ਤਾਂ ਅੱਜ ਵੀ ਕਿਤੇ ਨਾ ਕਿਤੇ difficult ਹੁੰਦਾ ਹੀ ਹੈ. So how like how your parents were? They were supportive, or ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਨਹੀਂ, you had to struggle and go through that entire process of convincing them.
Uh, it was both, a bit of both.
Okay.
Um, my father always felt that I was very good at English, and therefore he wanted me to actually get into IAS. But
Okay.
for my physical problem, I could not work that many hours to get into IAS. So journalism, he was fine with me being in journalism. But
Okay.
first problem I faced, and really I had to convince them when I went to interview the Dalai Lama. Now I
Hmm.
had to go with a photographer. So to travel out with a male, how comfortable or secure I would be. I mean, that
Right.
mindset, parents always worried about you.
So true.
So I told my father, I said, look, if you've educated me, you have to trust me that I can look after myself.
Right.
So that was the beginning, my first assignment out of station with the Dalai Lama in Dharamsala. And then after that, every avenue opened up. But it was not just my parents, even people.
Yeah.
I remember at the height of the Punjab problem, मैं एक बारी चंडीगढ़ तो दिल्ली वापस आ रही थी by an evening bus. ਐਂਡ ਮੇਰੇ ਨਾਲ ਇੱਕ ਬੰਦਾ ਬੈਠਾ ਸੀ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਐਵੇਂ ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਮਤਲਬ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਨਾ two people
Hmm.
are sitting on a 5-hour journey, they just break into
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah.
So he broke into a conversation with me and ਕਹਿਣ ਲੱਗਾ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕੀ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੋ ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਮੈਂ ਜਰਨਲਿਸਟ ਹਾਂ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਤੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਮਾਪਿਓ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਟਰੈਵਲ ਕਰਨ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਨੇ I said yes. He
Hmm.
said don't you feel insecure what the people would say. ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਇੱਕ ਗੱਲ ਦੱਸੋ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਫੈਮਿਲੀ 'ਚ ਕੋਈ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਮੇਰੀ ਵਾਈਫ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਨਾਈਟ ਡਿਊਟੀਜ਼ ਕਰਦੀ ਹੈ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ
Hmm.
ਹਾਂਜੀ ਕਰਦੀ ਹੈ ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਕੋਈ ਆਬਜੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਨਹੀਂ ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ 'ਚ he said no. I said why should you object if I'm reporting from outstation. Actually there were very few women in
Yeah.
journalism, but I was still the second generation. There was a generation before me who really created the ground for us to move into journalism. But
Right.
I must say that ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਿਨਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਨਾ journalists either you had to really fight for your rights.
Yeah.
ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ soft beats ਤੇ ਪਾਉਂਦੇ ਸੀ.
Hmm.
Women
Hmm.
and child development
Yeah.
story, which would never find space in a paper because politics always overtook. So
Right.
I just said, no, this is what I'm doing, and I managed to do. The other reason was, agar tusi mainstream papers which ਹੈਗੇ ਹੋ, ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ Hindustan Times, Times of India, then it's a very hierarchical
Right.
journey. ਉਹ ਆਣ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਸੀਨੀਅਰਸ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਆਣ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਜਾਂ ਤੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਡੈਸਕ ਤੇ ਕਰਨਗੇ so by choice I chose smaller papers where I had every single opportunity. I mean, a few years from crime I got to do defense,
Wow.
you know so those kind of opportunities I grabbed, and I made a very conscious choice to be able to. I mean, you do one beat at a time, and
Yeah.
mostly uh, bigger organizations ਤੁਸੀਂ ਉਸ beat ਸੜਦੇ ਹੀ ਰਹਿੰਦੇ ਹੋ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਥੱਕ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਹੋ. You don't want to pursue that. You lose your interest, but you have to continue in that.
So true,
But
so
in
true.
my case, yeah, I was able to do defense, home, prime minister's office, Ministry of External Affairs, the president, and international assignments. My first international assignment was the IPKF operations in Sri Lanka.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then I did the coup in Maldives. Then I did the fourth summit in Brazil. And then I did the Middle East war, Kuwait and Iraq war. I went to make a film on post Gulf War Kuwait. So, I mean, my journey was very exciting. And, as journalist, thoda ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ tough होना पैंदा है. I'll
Of
give you
course.
two interesting examples. In my early days, when I just began, I went to interview Maharaja of Bharatpur. By then, Mrs. Gandhi had stopped the privy purses. वो बड़े औखे सी सारे महाराजे सिंधे मुंह मिलते ही नहीं सी. So they were really angry. And I went to this Maharaja of Bharatpur's house. You wouldn't believe visually, just imagine, he had such a thick chain tied across the boundary wall with this being a lock.
True.
And I just scaled over it and I just loitered around in the front lawn and I took pictures of the tanks lying there, the guns, and so on and so forth. And I met a gardener. So I told him कि महाराजा जी से मिलना है.
Hmm.
He says महाराजा जी किसी से मिलते नहीं है. I said लेकिन मैं तो पत्रकार हूँ और दिल्ली से आई हूँ. He says वो तो प्रिंस ऑफ नॉर्वे आए थे, उनको नहीं वो
Hmm.
मिले तो आप क्या है. So I went in the porch. I went and sat on a sofa, and I said, "I'm not moving till he comes out." So eventually, he had to send in a message. The Maharaja came out, and at the top of his voice, he started shouting at me, "How dare you scale my place, and how dare you enter into it," and so on and so forth. And I just started talking very comfortably, very softly, with great humility. And he got so provoked. Then, in the next 5 minutes, he spoke non-stop. He said, "There was a time when I could afford 1,000 servants. Now I can't afford even 100. So I thought to myself, I mean, most people can't afford even one. He's still talking about 100. He says, "Thanks to Mrs. Gandhi, look at the state of my sofas. They are in tatters. I have no money to even get them, redone. And I have burglaries, maybe any jewelry, lutti gayi hai, and so on and so on." So he spoke non-stop, and that was my first story. And I that was my first lesson also I learned. Never lose your temper, be as calm as possible, and there is no way that you won't get your story.
Wow. Ma'am, so I have a question from my audience. Rupinder Singh ji, he asked, how do you compare your initial journey with today's time? Do you feel it is easier for girls today to pursue this field of journalism?
Well, I think today it's the girls' world. You see the number of women who are especially television anchors. Our time was really difficult in many ways, even in terms
Yeah.
of technology. And I want to share one incident with you on this. ਅਸੀਂ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਸੀ ਆਊਟ ਸਟੇਸ਼ਨ ਫॉर ਐਗਜ਼ਾਮਪਲ ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਕਵਰ ਕਰਨ ਐਂਡ ਸਾਡਾ ਫਰਸਟ ਮੀਨਸ ਆਫ ਕਮਿਊਨੀਕੇਸ਼ਨ ਵਾਸ ਟੈਲੀਗ੍ਰਾਮ ਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ
Wow.
ਟੈਲੀਗ੍ਰਾਮ ਤੇ ਡਿਬੇਟ ਕਰਕੇ ਸਟੋਰੀ ਭੇਜਦੇ ਸੀ ਐਂਡ ਦ ਪ੍ਰੋਸੈਸ ਵਾਸ ਸੋ ਸਲੋ that ਅਸੀਂ ਸਟੋਰੀ ਕਰਕੇ ਵਾਪਸ ਆ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਸੀ ਟੈਲੀਗ੍ਰਾਮ ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਪਹੁੰਚਦੀ ਸੀ. So the next phase was that of teleprinters, which was much better than telegrams. And at times ਜਦੋਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਊਟ ਸਟੇਸ਼ਨ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਸੀ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਆਪਣੀ ਸਟੋਰੀ ਆਪ ਟਾਈਪ ਕਰਕੇ it used to be that ribbon jada punch ਹੁੰਦਾ ਸੀ
Hmm.
and ਬਾਅਦ
Hmm.
ਚੋਂ ਫਿਰ department ਵਾਲੇ ribbon ਲਗਾ ਕੇ ਉਹਨੂੰ story send ਕਰਦੇ ਸੀ. The first highlight of it was when I went to Brazil for the Earth Summit.
Okay.
Wow, straight from the uh, computer, you could fax it to your office. So from Brazil to Hyderabad, I was faxing my stories in a jiffy. That was, and not only the country went through that revolution, but even political leaders. I covered the Rath Yatra with Mr. Advani from Somnath to Samastipur.
Okay.
And he asked us, how are you sending your copies? We said through fax. He said, what's a fax machine? Imagine anybody asking that question today. But that was it. It was new technologies and not everybody was familiar. So it's a
This
long journey, both technologically as well as, being able to cover.
this was actually my second question, but you have already answered half of it. But still, I want to know that how did you manage to evolve from facts to now writing on laptop and managing everything? So technology, how did you manage that? And
Uh,
additionally, what is the what do we call it? What is the change that you have seen over these years in terms of journalism?
I think that every senior journalist does say the change I have seen is journalism has become very frivolous, primarily because of television.
Yeah.
It is a 24/7 hour television, so they over sensationalize breaking news, they try to compete with each other, and it's just images, 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 without any substance in the story, except for a few journalists like, I mean, or a few channels like NDTV ਜਿਹੜਾ ਥੋੜਾ in depth ਕਰਦੇ ਨੇ. But
Hmm.
as far as journalists are concerned, I mean, our time, it took a long, long time before you ever got a byline. That
Right.
was the purpose of the ਇੰਨਾ grill ਕਰਦੇ ਸੀਗੇ ਇੱਧਰ ਜਾਓ ਉੱਧਰ ਜਾਓ ਇਹ story ਉਹ story and you never got even the most exclusive stories, you never got a byline. But now you're born with a byline, and in 6 years, a person becomes an editor, and there are 100 kinds of editor, executive and deputy and consulting, and so on and so forth. Our time, there used to be one editor and then sub editors. ਜਿਹੜੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ copy edit ਕਰਦੇ ਸੀ. So I mean it's a long change. Your
True that.
second part of how did I adjust with technology? It wasn't very difficult for the simple reason कि journalists ਨੂੰ typewriter ਤੇ ਆਪਣੀ copies type ਕਰਨੀਆਂ ਪੈਂਦੀਆਂ ਸੀ ਤੇ ਜਦੋਂ ਅਸੀਂ out of station ਜਾਂਦੇ ਸੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ typewriters portable ਨਾਲ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਸੀ ਉਸ ਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ copy type ਕਰਦੇ ਸੀ actually on a A4 paper ਔਰ
Yeah.
ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਟੈਲੀਪ੍ਰਿੰਟਰ ਪੋਸਟ ਆਫਿਸ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਟੈਲੀਪ੍ਰਿੰਟਰ ਜਾਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਆਫਿਸ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਵੀ ਬ੍ਰਾਂਚ ਆਫਿਸਿਸ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਸੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਾਪੀ ਦੇ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਸੀ ਟਾਈਪ ਤੇ ਉਹ ਫਿਰ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਟੈਲੀਪ੍ਰਿੰਟਰ ਦੇ ਥਰੂ ਭੇਜ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਸੀ ਪਰ ਜਦੋਂ ਫੈਕਸ ਆਇਆ ਇਟ ਵਾਸ ਇਵਨ ਸਿੰਪਲਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੀ ਕਾਪੀ ਟਾਈਪਰਾਈਟਰ ਤੇ ਟਾਈਪ ਕੀਤੀ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਉਹਨੇ ਫੈਕਸ ਮਸ਼ੀਨ ਭੇਜ ਦਿੱਤੀ in few seconds you could know that your copy has reached. So I
Right.
mean adjustment of technology was not difficult. But way back in 86, I actually took a course in computer to learn and most offices, they had people coming to train how to, what a file is, because it was entirely a new vocabulary.
Right. Right. Right.
I mean, today's generation, if you ask them what is, now they are used to an iPad. They don't even relate with a laptop or
Right.
a desktop. Desktop, I don't think any of the present generation would have even seen.
Right.
So it was
So,
an
ma'am,
interesting one.
I am sure it is actually somewhat an evolution that you have seen and experienced, and
True.
that is why I was so intrigued to ask these questions and get more information from you because I'm not sure that you know or not. I am a PR professional, so it's my
Yes.
everyday job to call journalists and talk to them, and like it's my everyday thing. It's my bread and butter. So yeah, that's why I was so intrigued to know more about it.
Yeah.
Ma'am, another question from Rupinder Singh ji is, do you think journalism today is more biased?
More biased.
Yeah,
Absolutely, 100%. I mean, in the last 5 or 10 years, every person who's asked me what profession they must choose, I tell them go anywhere but journalism for two reasons. I mean, this government has. Okay, before that, I'd like to share that there are four pillars of democracy, and media is one of them, right?
right.
So when the all the pillars are destroyed and contained, and it's become an era of fake news. You
Right.
know, you want to write a good copy as an objective journalist, your employees don't allow you because your employees are under pressure from other sources. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't want to name, but from other areas, and they don't want raids in their offices and show how much money they want, so they succumb to the pressures. And it's become such a shameful profession now, except for a few people like Ramesh Kumar. Hats off to him that he has survived despite
Right.
Punya Prasoon Joshi. I mean, I can count people on my fingers.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm a founder member of the Women's Journalist Club, which is called Indian Women's Press Corps. And
Yeah.
we have a WhatsApp group. Not only has journalism become a, a highly biased and influenced profession, but there is a total division in society, which is a very sad part. I
Yeah.
mean, in this WhatsApp group, there are daily fights. Something has happened somewhere. One will support the government, the other will support the opposition. That is
Right.
not a journalist's job.
Yeah.
Your job is to write a copy as objectively as possible and do not come in between politics at all. That's not your business. But it has become that like that, and we can do very little about it. I think media is going to, it's almost finished.
Right.
And the other thing is, it's one of the most insecure jobs today.
Yeah.
Earlier times, Baki jobs was hunda si, you entered a profession in your 20s
Hmm.
and you retired at 58 or 60, whatever the laws were at a given time.
Right.
Now, by the time you are around 30, 32, you are out. Everything is on a contract. You are out and you are in the middle of her career, being able to do nothing. Look at Barkha. She was
Yeah.
a star reporter. Where is she today? She's just been thrown out.
Right.
That is true of every single journalist today. Mid career, they're totally out. So I do not advise anybody to even get into journalism today. Unless
Another
you're
question.
adaptable,
Yeah.
unless you're adaptable, like I adapted to so many new things. I mean,
So
mid career, I actually went to Canada to study film, but then I started doing films much earlier. Right as the time मैं journalism joined kita से, television थे बहुत restricted से, दूरदर्शन और educational television NCERT.
Hmm.
So मेरी एक friend Siggy NCRT and she said कि they are picking up people to train them into educational television. Do you want to do the course? I said certainly. So I went and joined it. This was way back in the 80s.
Okay.
And I started doing educational programs. That was my beginning. And from then I was working apart from my journalism full time. I started working part time with ANI. Now it's the biggest
Yeah.
video agency,
Yeah.
and I used to write documentary scripts for them. That's how I began, you know. And then I
So, ma'am,
started doing stories. Yeah.
ma'am, talking about documentaries, so what was your genre? Like, what mostly you used to write at that time, and how
Uh,
many documentaries you have written so far?
Actually, I've done quite a variety of
Okay.
documentary. Initially, it started with developmental,
Okay.
like when Sam Petroda came in, there were technology missions,
Okay.
derivation, non-conventional energy sources, all those kind of. So initially, I did documentary films on that, and later, when I was on my own, I continued with again a very wide variety of. On the one hand, I did programs on militancy and post-militancy in Punjab and Kashmir.
Wow.
Then I did on new technologies like, roses, greenhouse cultivation of roses, which had come from Israel. I did it for the National Horticulture Board. Then I did on the Sikh regiment, the sesquicentennial celebrations, Sikh regiment in Ramgarh. This was soon after the revolt there had taken place. This was called Invincible Warriors. And I did on the Brahmaputra,
Okay.
managing the, what was it called? Managing the floods.
Okay.
Brahmaputra is like a sea. You know, it keeps chewing the earth, and if you see on either side, you'll see mud just falling into the water. So, I mean, how are they containing the floods? Then I did on Sikkim, the merger of Sikkim and development in it since then. I did on Shillong, Arunachal Pradesh, and what else did I do? Yes, and I did two short films, which were shot on 60 mm, which was really how feature films were shot at one time. These
Wow.
two films were, yeah, one was Soft Target, very short film, almost 2 minutes, and the other was Alone in Canada. It was the story of two friends who were very thick while in India and they studied together. And once one of them moved to Canada and the other went to pursue a higher cause, they could not connect again because of the change in culture. So that was my other. Then I co-wrote a feature film
Okay.
on Indira Gandhi, which was going to be launched, but there were all kinds of hurdles. It was called Mother, the Indira Gandhi story.
Okay.
Uh, so it's been a pretty long journey, and I always say it's always not bad to have plan A and plan B. You are out of one, you always can follow the other one, and that's I've swung between the two. You know.
Ma'am, what I can figure out is, of course, your journey has been a roller coaster, I'm sure. And you have picked some very impactful and influential topics. And at the same time, these topics are not something that anybody would pick. So you were never scared that kuch ho sakta hai, the impact. मेरे पे कुछ हो सकता है, it is a little controversial topic, something like that. It was never there in you?
No, no. But I mean, there were moments of scare. I must tell you very honestly. I'd gone to Kashmir to shoot a film in Bandhama. Now, Bandhama was it was a very important constituency because Chief Minister Farooq Abdullah used to contest from one of the areas called Gandarbal there.
True.
And a mass massacre had happened there where all the Kashmiri Pandits were killed. So entering that area was very difficult because it was by then infested by insurgents and people being sent from Pakistan, which is today's story. This is in the 90s.
Hmm.
And to enter that place, I had to seek the help of army, BSF, and local police.
Right.
600 people threw a cordon around that village so that we could enter and peacefully do the film. And what happened? There was a technician, you know, who wanted to say that he was a very low category, basically a person who was to lug around the camera. But he wanted to say that, see, I'm such an important person. He switched off the camera switch, and after that, the entire footage was in black and white. I was
Oh.
horrified when I got
Hmm.
back to the hotel and I reviewed the footage. I was absolutely horrified. I just didn't know what to do. So I again called up the Director General Police and I said, we haven't been able to get, and there's been some technical problem. We have to go back to it. So when we went back to it, I mean, it took nearly 3 weeks to reschedule that. We were hanging around there in Kashmir and, to reshoot this thing. But I also took up very unfamiliar, challenging subjects like uh, weapons and militancy,
Yeah.
uh, money and militancy. Not many people knew the kind of money that was being spent to keep alive militancy there. I mean, those days, on an average, about a crore of rupees was being spent a month. And little boys, I mean, in this insurgency, little boys were picked up from Kashmir and they were told, तुम्हें 50 रुपए देंगे अगर तुम ये गाड़ी में आर्मी या पैरामिलिट्री की गाड़ी में ग्रेनेड फेंकोगे. Many of those little kids, they were not, trained
Right.
into soldiering. They
Right.
lost their fingers, they lost their hands. And I did some very interesting human interest stories on them, like how they were culled into it because of poverty.
Right.
Some of them would say, हमारे माता पिता हमसे टोकरियां बनवाते हैं, हमको टोकरी नहीं बनाना है, तो इसमें हमको मजा आता है, बाहर निकलने को मिलता है.
Right.
So those were the reasons that.
Ma'am, I'm already, like I mentioned before, I was intrigued to know. Now I am amazed that how you must have managed. But moving forward, I have a question from Harshpreet Singh Bhasin. He's from my team only. He says, is journalism not very provocative today?
It is, especially the Arnav Goswami kind of journalism. I mean, I've often wondered why the Pakistanis at all come and participate in their programs. All they do is to humiliate them. I mean,
Right.
you look at BBC, you look at CNN, their job is to ask a meaningful question. media is the medium to disseminate information, not to shout. And I think the
Correct.
entire media has gone away from their primary responsibility of asking discerning questions and being able to get responses for that and reaching it out to the common public. Because you're a medium between the government, between the people, and the common people who have no access to these areas. So if you're not going to fulfill your responsibilities, you have failed to be journalists. It is provocative. I totally agree. And I mean,
Ma'am,
sometimes we feel that we don't even fit into this.
yeah, I'm sure. Ma'am, Rupinder Singh says, I hope Harshpreet, your query has been resolved. And if you have any additional questions, please shoot. Rupinder Singh ji says, thank you so much for answering my questions in such an elaborate manner.
You are.
So, ma'am, there is one thing that is journalism, but now talking about creative field because journalism, and when you cover political, not soft stories, you cover
Yeah.
crime and such things. But at the same time, you are into creative field wherein you need to devote so much of time, and at the
Yeah.
same time, the process is very different. So,
Yeah.
how did story writing and book writing, everything came into picture?
Okay. Um, basically, I would say uh, whether you are a journalist, whether you are a story writer, whether you are an author or you are a filmmaker, primarily you are a storyteller.
Yeah.
Rest is learning the craft of moving from one genre to the other. Now, journalism, of course, was my first thing, my first job. So that was not difficult over a period of time. I mean, I was from English background, so writing came naturally to me, you know. But from that to filmmaking, as I said, I got an opportunity very early by doing the basics with NCERT, and then on the job learning with ANI, and then moving towards feature films. As far as book writing is concerned, is again a very interesting incident. One day I mean, those were the days. Again, I should recall that telephones were not, in every home.
Yeah.
It took almost 10 years of booking, and then you could get uh, a landline in your home. Imagine today's life where you cannot even walk on the street without your mobile phone. So
Right.
one morning, my editor, he sent me a note. This is in '84, just after Operation Blue Star.
Okay.
He said, "It is my sincere advice that as a person who has excellent contacts in Punjab and a very good understanding of the issues, it's a lifetime opportunity for you to do a book." So, I was a little confused. I mean, book writing, I don't know where to begin and where to end.
Right.
So, how do I do it? He says, I will be there to guide you, but the basic material you have, and you have the requisite contacts. So, I didn't think for a moment, and I started traveling through Punjab very, very extensively. That is how my book Blue Star over Amritsar has gone into third edition. And Khushwant Singh wrote the introduction to the book. Um, so I started traveling immensely through Punjab, meeting people who were caught inside the Golden Temple, meeting politicians, meeting common people who were caught. between the militants and the armed forces. I met Sundarji, I met General Brar, every important person who was involved. I met everybody, and I was almost ready with my first draft in 6 months, that is by October 1984. But then happened the assassination of Mrs. Gandhi.
Right.
That changed the entire thrust of the book, and I had to go and rewrite again.
Oh,
Now, from the point of anger to total alienation.
yeah.
And just as I finished the next draft, Longowal and group were released and elections were held in the state. Again, the whole thrust had to be changed. So at that point in time, I decided I'm going to cut off at 1986. That is when the elections were held and the new government came into power and whatever were the developments at that time. And at some other stage, I will catch up from here and put it in the second edition because this part of history is very important. It needs to be recorded and it must, be written down. But two factors I would like to highlight over here. When I did my first draft and sent it to my editor, he sent back the draft to me saying it's completely confused. I think give yourself a vote of confidence and rewrite it. Eventually, I had to, because of the changes, do eight drafts, and it came to be regarded as one of the best books world over. It's been written about one of the best books on the subject. You know, I mean, not many people had that sense at that time, but
So
I
true.
collected the smallest of details, you know, like there was an army paper called Bachi, which wrote some very very inconvenient things about the Sikhs at that time. But I got copies and I stored them. Then I went to the hospital. I collected the postmortem reports. Then I went everywhere, wherever an incident had happened, and I maintained a diary and I started jotting notes, you know. So as a result, people started telling me that this is the first authentic work on the subject. And you know, you feel very encouraged when your work is rewarded and acknowledged.
So true. Ma'am, I want to know that how this is actually I am curious about to know how old you were at that time because understanding that process entirely is actually so much to process in and take in, and at the same time you have to have a hell lot of courage to write on such a topic. So how old were you to manage all these things together?
Okay. Uh, I was 28,
Wow.
but the advantage I had was that I started covering Punjab because there was so much happening during that point in time that I started covering Punjab around 78. That is when the developments were happening. And of course, till 84, I had covered everything in and out, and I knew all the people, all the leaders, everything. But after that, it was my travels through almost every area. ਕਿਸੇ ਨੂੰ ਦੱਸਣ ਦੀ ਲੋੜ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਸੀ ਇਸ area ਵਿੱਚ ਇਹ ਹੋਇਆ. I would just take off and go. It was a hell of a lot of difficult period.
Yes.
Then eventually it became, I should say, full-fledged organized crime. And yet we went and covered the 92 election. I must say it was almost 6 o'clock by the time we left Patiala and we were moving towards Jalandhar. Roads Sannata. And you know, those were the times where anybody was stopped, their car was stolen, their money was stolen, all kinds of things were happening, whether they were people of the government or they were the locals. Nobody knew at that point. So I was traveling with the resident editor of Times of India, and now we thought, what if we get looted? We have no money beyond that. What do we do? So we just took out all the money we had and put it under the car seat and said, at least if they ask us, we'll say that's all we have. And but fortunately, nothing happened, and we safely reached Jalandhar, and thereafter onward journey to the elections.
So, ma'am, you have written two books on 1984, if I'm not mistaken.
I have done three editions of Blue
Three years.
Star,
Okay.
three editions, and I have done another book which is a perspective on what has been the problem of the Sikhs with the center. That's called 1984 Lessons from History, Intrigue and Conflict in Center Sikh Relations.
Wow. Okay. So
So
I'm
that
sure that
sorry. So I've taken the second book right from partition to the present times. That how the problem started right during debates in the Constituent Assembly. So
yeah.
I've taken that historical perspective. Yeah.
Superb. So, ma'am, moving forward, I want to know more about your books then, because these topics were somewhat controversial. So, after that, you have written some very recently also, you have launched a coffee table book. So, I
Yeah.
want to know more about those books. If you can give us a little bit of synopsis, so all of us can go back and read and know more about our culture because it is more of culture driven.
Right. My first coffee table book was um, again very journalistic, I should say, because it was event related. Um, in I think 2008, if I remember correctly, there were 400-year celebrations of the Adi Granth. So Adi Granth, I don't know whether you understand or not. There is a little difference between Adi Granth and Guru Granth Sahib. Adi Granth was the first recension or the first copy of Guru Granth Sahib, which was compiled by Guru Arjan Dev. That means it takes the Bani only of the first five Gurus and some of the uh, Banis that were collected of the Bhattas
Okay.
collected by Guru Nanak. Then after that, in the final Guru Granth Sahib, Guru Gobind Singh Ji has added the Bani of his own father, Guru Tegh Bahadur, and that is now the final. He didn't take even a verse. He was such a prolific writer, wrote in several languages, but he did not incorporate a single shabad of his own in the Guru Granth Sahib. Look at the humility of the man. And then it was recompiled by adding the verses of Guru Tegh Bahadur. So the celebration was up to the recension by Guru Arjan Dev. So we did a coffee table on that, telling people what the whole background was, what were the small stories, what were the developments, and a whole lot of pictures. Of course, coffee table means a lot of pictures. Then
Right.
the second book, second coffee table, I did in 2010. Both these books, 1984 Lessons from History and that, were around the same time at a gap of 6 months. On
Hmm.
Anandpur side, a miracle of the human spirit. Now, the story explores basically the entire city of Anandpur and the stories around it. You know, how one man who had a voluntary army, Guru
Right.
Gobind had an army of volunteers compared to the professionally paid army of the Mughals. How they
Right.
fought and they won at every single stage. I mean, That was a story which was meant to be told, and the story relives in the monuments that are still there in Anandpur Sahib. So we took very detailed picture of the killa, which killa was used for what kind of training, why Holi became Hola for them. Even today we call it Hola Mohalla, and rest
Oh,
of India calls it Holi. And the different battles of the saint warriors, and then the formation of the Khalsa and the story thereafter. So it's basically the story centered around Guru Gobind Singh and the city of Anandpur Sahib, which is, as I said, it's called Anandpur Sahib, a miracle of the human spirit. Imagine nischay kar apni jeet karo, which is today the slogan of the Sikh regiment.
right,
Still use this. I mean, victory is yours if you're using fair means, and if you're fighting for a cause. Imagine 32 people in fighting an army of 10,000 men and still winning. That was the kind of spirit he created in the Khalsa. So it was a story worth telling. Then I recently done a coffee table on 550 years of Guru Nanak Dev. This was commissioned to me by the Sikh Cultural Center. They bring out a magazine called the Sikh Review from Calcutta. It's a
right.
Calcutta-based organization, and that is over, which has recently been released by Hardeep Puri. And my next one is now on Guru Tegh Bahadur, whose 400 years celebration start on April 1 this year.
Ma'am,
So,
please tell us more about this picture.
oh, Hardeep Puri is honoring me with a shawl, and
Wow.
rest of the people are from the Sikh Cultural Center. The man on the left is the Lochan Singh MP, and number two is Harminder Kaur, part of the Sikh Cultural Center. Then it is Hardeep Puri, then Ravinder Ahuja, who is by profession a chartered accountant but part of the Sikh Cultural Center. And then there is DIG Pratap Singh, who is the main person connected with the Sikh Review and the Sikh Cultural Center. So they honored me with a shawl after releasing the book.
Amazing. Ma'am, I'm sure this episode is something we won't be able to hear all your stories. It seems like I need to do parts of it because you have so much to share.
I mean, it's a long
Uh,
journey. 40 years is not a small time and a
right.
very full journey.
1 hour is not justified. But moving forward, I have a question from Kaur Singh ji. He says, "Nice, ma'am. Kindly share your thoughts and vision for our emerging generations with respect to principle of Sikhi."
Principle of Sikhi. I must share this. I was very pained, very, very pained when I went to Takht Kesgar Sahib while doing my book on Anandpur Sahib, that almost 80% of the Sikhs were clean shaven. You know, the first thing I would say is that you have been given a form for a reason. If you believe in the teachings of the gurus, do retain the form.
Right,
I mean, you are spread so widely around the world, and all over the world, the Sikhs are regarded with great respect now,
right,
especially after a few people made a special campaign and tried to educate the world what Sikhism was all about. And that was the need of the hour, because Westerners confuse Sikhs with Muslims. And after 9/11 happened, uh, there were random attacks on Sikhs. So they
Right.
had to tell the world that they are not fanatics. They are people who sacrifice, who share, who love, and who believe in equality. These are the principles and lessons of Sikhism taught to us by Guru Nanak and followed by the Sikhs for several generations. And there is no reason why we must not follow them now. Guru Nanak said man is the acme, he's the highest living being among God's creation. He has a mind. He must apply that mind to understand, to connect with God. And that
Right.
is where your ego would be submerged and you will become an elevated human beings who will not only respect your fellow human beings, but also God's entire creation. Your first lessons of environment come from Guru Granth Sahib. You
Right.
know, where Nanak says that God has created the entire creation. And it is God's will that everything should be respected. So you have no right to destroy what God has created. That is the biggest inspiration for the Sikhs, I would say, to follow the teachings of Guru Nanak.
Beautiful words, ma'am. Beautiful. I'm sure Kavalbir Singh ji, ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ question ਸੀ ਉਹ answer ਹੋਇਆ, and this is for all of us, for generation, for our generation specifically. Thank you so much, ma'am. Uh, what Another comment is there? Rupinder Singh ji says, "Thank you, Taman Bindra, Manpreet, and Harshpreet for starting the show. These famous Sikhs are so inspiring." Thank you so much, Rupinder Singh ji. And indeed, these Sikhs are somebody who I learn every Sunday. We learn every Sunday. My entire team is thankful to these people who join us. And thank you so much for watching our show. So, ma'am, talking about storytelling, I want to know that what is your piece of advice, because I know that you take workshops also on storytelling, and it is very difficult. It is not something anybody can do it. So,
Right.
a piece of advice on storytelling. Whosoever wants to be a storyteller for them, and additionally, I want to know your favorite book that you have written so far. You have written a couple of books, and there are books that are in the pipeline also. But what is your favorite genre and favorite book out of all that you have written?
My Blue Star remains my most
Star.
authentic and yes, my favorite book. And you see, this book has been around for 30 years and it is
Wow.
still the most sought after book because of
Right.
the details it carries.
I am
And
surely going to read this one because yesterday, while I was researching, I'm being very honest, I read the synopsis and I had goosebumps. I was so intrigued to know more about it. Of course, we have read, but this is not something that we have experienced, fortunately. But I'm sure you have written, and that is actually a manuscript, I would say. So I really want to go back and read this book. And today, conversing with you on this is even more inspiring and makes me feel that okay, I want to go back and read this one. So the star performer is Operation Blue Star only. And please, ma'am, enlighten us about storytelling.
well, storytelling is a craft. You know, it's a craft in which you have to start by telling about the world. Now, when you say the world, it doesn't mean the entire world. It is the world of your story. That means who, what, when, why, where. Who are the characters? For example, if there are the four characters in a
Correct.
story, what are they? Who are they? What is their relationship? That becomes the world. And then you have to have your plot points. by plot points, I mean, how will the story move forward? There is something that has to happen in your life. For example, you have a diamond ring in which you have placed some secret and you're a spy agent and it gets lost. So it becomes your life's mission to, that's called a plot point. Okay, so you have to have plot points integrated all along the story so that it propels the story ahead. Now, Hollywood films do not have a break,
Yeah.
but Bollywood films have a interval.
Right.
So you ought to have some kind of a cliffhanger, a kind of a situation so that the people come back into the cinema hall to watch the rest. So these are the broad areas of craft. And then as you move past interval, uh, there has to be, I mean, you have to have at least 4 to 5 major plot points which will drive the story. And then, of course, the end, and the end must have happened sooner than most people would want it, because, and then the biggest thing with the Bollywood film is you
Hmm.
must go home with a good feeling, the elixir.
Yeah.
That is why in Bollywood films, hero and heroine meet. Wherever they have died or that film has failed. So, you've come to watch a film, it's entertainment, it must entertain you, and at the end of it, give you some elixir which gives you a broad smile, and you go home. So that's,
Yeah.
in brief, that's what storytelling is all about. Same, you can write the novel. Same, in fact, I am going to move into fiction very shortly, but somehow I'm overwhelmed with the kind of work I have. I have my next 2 books. Of course, I've been commissioned Guru Tegh Bahadur's book, but I also want to come out with a book of all the interviews I have with from Gyani Zail Singh to General Sundarji to General Brar, Darbara Singh, Longowal, Bindranwale, Badal, Barnala, every important character who mattered during that period. I have very detailed interviews with them, which throw a light on what was the politics of how they were thinking about the situation at that point in time. That's a very important book. I have to write. Everybody's been pushing me to do it. That has a historical importance. 50 years or 100 years from now, when people will read this part of history, it gives them, you know, information as to what happened. So that is my first priority. And of course, these 2 books is what I'm working on.
Ma'am, we are so looking forward to more because I'm sure after doing this interview, I can't tell you, I'm so glad that I got an opportunity to interact with a person like you. You have so much to share. Actually, I'm saying this again and again because the one episode can't justify this. You have so much and it's so insightful.
Thank you.
And ma'am, my last question to you is now that you're quite famous, so how do you think that you want to, how do you want to give back to the society? Of course, you are giving it in a way of writing and sharing, but still, what is something that you want to do that, okay, I want to give back to the society in this way? Anything particular on your mind?
Actually, I'm already doing that. I work as a social activist with the Sikh Forum, where we have 2 annual programs to commemorate the Operation Blue Star as well as the anti-Sikh riots. Then we collectively work towards getting justice for the people. We constantly keep writing to the authorities that be on what needs to be done. We work also with Phulka ji on this, um, and we support children's education.
Hmm.
Uh, the children of 1984 who are not in a position because almost three generations have gone wasted.
Right.
First generation got killed, second generation lived under trauma, and their children, uh, don't have financial support. So we provide them financial support for their higher education, people who are deserving. Um, and now, personally, also want to adopt one child's education from Badusa because they are doing a great job. And, we feel that the number of Sikhs in bureaucracy has gone down, in armed forces have gone down, um, for many reasons, not one, for many reasons, which is a topic for another day. And but whoever can, we encourage, and I myself am going to check with Badu Sahib, who's a deserving candidate who doesn't have financial support, and we'll be paying for that child's education. That is how we try and give back to society.
Wow.
And anybody, I mean, I also, anybody who wants to study English, I happily, work with children. And I must tell you that most children who were getting like 8 out of 20 or 11 out of 20, after coming to me and in their 12th standard, have done the best in English, scoring almost 95 out of 100, 95, 97. So,
Wow.
I'd be very happy to work with children who are deserving or who have any difficulty with English language, because I mean I'm at a stage where it is my bounden duty to give back to society.
Ma'am, herein if you have said, so I am going to bother you because I'm pursuing MA English, and now you have said that anybody can ask for help, so I am surely coming to you and ask. Okay, thank you so much, ma'am. And ma'am, one more question that I have. Any message that you want to share for our audience and for our team? We would anything that you want to say.
Well, what I would like to say from my experience is never miss an opportunity. Never. And even if you've made mistakes in your life, grab the next possible opportunity. I moved from pursue your passions. I mean, imagine Pranoy Roy was an economist. From there, he'd become a journalist. I mean, he would have been a very successful economist also. So, whatever your passions are, you pursue and you will never fail. If you are honestly doing your work, you will never fail. Have confidence in yourself. That's the biggest message I would give to people.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Also, we have a couple of pictures. Can I please request my team to share it on the screen? And ma'am
Sure.
can tell us more about it.
Sure. This was during the release of 1984 Lessons from History. Kuldeep Nair sitting next to me, Seema Paul, Seema Mustafa. She's a journalist who moderated, and next to them is Justice S.S. Sodi. Uh,
Okay.
he comes from the family of Guru Gobind Singh, and they have lots and lots of land in Anandpur Sahib and Gurdwara Keshkar land, and where Guru Tegh Bahadur used to live is a place given by them. and
Okay.
he is also a judge. He was also a judge who, um, gave three very important judgments. Uh, you remember there was this Kashmiri girl who was murdered, and the whole case was brushed under the carpet. Then Jessica Lal and one other, three major judgments he gave, and he punished the people who were getting away through their influence with political masters. So,
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for sharing with us. Any other picture that we have? Maybe we can share. Yeah.
this is when Gyani Zail Singh was president. After Blue Star, I had gone to interview him and ask him was the last bits of conversation Mrs. Gandhi had with you before Operation Blue Star, and why couldn't you prevent it? So it was a long interview on that, which I'm going to put in this book I've talked about.
Thank you, ma'am. We look forward to it. And I think we have one more.
Oh,
Yes.
this is Anandpur, sir. This is Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. This is in his racecourse residence. On the left is Vijay Shankar, my first editor, who's now my co-author of many books.
Okay.
Myself, and on the right is Sharad Saxena. He was the photographer who did books, who did photos for Anandpur Sahib, and unfortunately, he is no more. So this we went to present. Actually, we wanted him to release this book, but he was very tied down. So he said he will give a brief time for making a presentation of the copy of the book to him, but he's a bit tied down, so he can't release it.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, now I want to know that how was your experience? And if you can share your experience being with us today, how was it?
It was nice. It was a nice, friendly talk. I enjoyed. Uh,
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you. We have learned a lot. I'm not sure that you enjoyed or not, but thoroughly
oh,
I did.
certainly, I enjoyed it.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Such a
Satrika. Thank you so much to my audience. I hope you enjoyed this show because I thoroughly did. So, ਅਗਲੇ ਹਫਤੇ ਮਿਲਨੇ ਆ ਵੱਡਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਤਿਕਾਰ ਛੋਟਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਿਆਰ ਅਗਲੇ ਹਫਤੇ ਮਿਲਾਂਗੇ ਐਸੀ ਜਗ੍ਹਾ ਐਤਵਾਰ ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ
And now, a man who needs no introduction.